The wind whistled through the crevices of the Rockies, like the mournful cry of a cursed soul. At an altitude of over 3,000 meters, the air was thin and bitingly cold like invisible blades, ready to sever the breath of any creature daring to challenge the severity of winter. Kaleb sat motionless by the frost-covered window of the abandoned ranger station. In his hands was an oil-soaked patch, slowly cleaning the barrel of an old M24 sniper rifle. It was a habit, or rather a ritual, to keep his hands from trembling and his mind from drifting back to memories stained with blood and gunpowder. At 40, Kaleb's hair was already flecked with ash. The crisscrossing scars on his arms were a testament to a past he had tried to bury beneath the thick snow of this mountain. He had once been a legend in the K-9 Special Forces unit, the handler of the fiercest warrior dogs. But that was before Gunner died. Gunner, a fawn-colored Malinois, had lunged into the line of fire to shield Kaleb from a fatal bullet. Gunner's death didn't just take a teammate. It took a part of Kaleb's soul. He left the military, carrying the self-inflicted conviction, "I am the one who brings death." Kaleb vowed to himself, amidst the absolute silence of this peak, that he would never let another dog into his life. He wasn't worthy of their loyalty. Kaleb raised the rifle, placing his eye to the optic scope. Not for hunting. He didn't kill anymore. He only watched. The scope was the only way he connected with the outside world, a connection that was safe, distant, and cold. The world through the converging lens narrowed into a sharp circle. Snow-covered pine ridges, steep gray cliffs, and then an unusual dark spot entered his field of view. About a kilometer west of the ranger station, where the treacherous trail ran along the edge of the abyss, a black pickup truck was parked. The engine was still running, white smoke puffing from the exhaust blending into the pending blizzard. Kaleb frowned. No one came up here at this hour, unless they were hiding something. The truck door opened. Two men stepped out, wearing thick coats. Looking furtive, they went to the bed of the truck and dragged out a large, heavy sack. The way they carried the sack wasn't like handling cargo. It was rough, hurried, and cruel. 1, 2, 3. The sack sailed over the guardrail and plunged straight down the deep ravine below. The two men dusted their hands, jumped back in the truck, and sped off, leaving behind deep tire tracks in the fresh snow and a discarded secret. Kaleb lowered his rifle. Trash, he thought. Humans always found the most beautiful places to dump their garbage. He was about to turn back to his cold coffee, but a small movement in his visual memory held him back. He raised his eye to the scope again, adjusting the focus to the bottom of the ravine where the sack had fallen. It was stuck on a protruding, snow-covered rock ledge. And then the sack moved. It wasn't rolling from the wind. It was squirming. A weak, desperate spasm. Kaleb's heart skipped a beat. The conscience of a soldier, which he thought had frozen with his heart, suddenly stirred. It was a living creature. He cursed under his breath, grabbed his thick parka, slipped into his combat boots, and took his climbing gear. Kaleb rushed out the door, plunging himself into the wind and snow that was beginning to howl. The descent to the ravine floor was harder than Kaleb had imagined. The cliff face was slick with black ice, and the wind gusts were so strong they threatened to tear him from the rock. But the calloused hands of a soldier gripped every crack, lowering himself to the ledge where the sack lay. Precariously. By the time Kaleb got close, the sack had stopped moving. An eerie silence fell, broken only by the whistling wind in his ears. He pulled the combat knife from his belt, the cold steel blade slicing through the rope tying the sack shut. He prepared himself for a terrible sight, a wild animal, a corpse, or worse, a child. But when the rough canvas ripped open, what emerged made his stomach clench. A German shepherd. She was curled up, her black and fawn coat matted with mud and dry blood. A loop of gray duct tape was cinched tightly around her muzzle, preventing her from barking or panting. Her hind leg was bent at a strange angle, shattered. Along her flank, a long trail of blood ran down her body. A bullet grazed, tearing open the skin. She was alive, but barely. As Kaleb reached out to cut the duct tape on her muzzle, he instinctively paused. A wounded and panicked dog was the most dangerous thing. She could shred his hand as soon as she was freed, but he saw no aggression in those wide-open eyes. Kaleb gently cut the tape. "It's okay, girl. Breathe," he whispered, his voice hoarse from long disuse. The dog gasped for the cold air, her chest heaving violently. But instead of turning to bite or whining in pain, she did something that stunned Kaleb. She clawed desperately at the snow with her front paws, trying to drag her broken body toward the sheer cliff face. She wasn't looking at Kaleb. Her beautiful amber eyes were fixed upward, where the trail was hidden by the white screen of snow. She whimpered, a sound that wasn't from her broken leg, but sounded like the heartbroken cry of someone separated. "You're crazy." Kaleb gripped her shoulder, stopping her from tumbling into the abyss again. "You can't climb up there with that leg." The dog turned to look at him. For the first time, their eyes met. Kaleb shuddered. There was no wildness of an animal. In those eyes was a rational plea, a profound pain, and utter helplessness. She licked his gloved hand lightly, then turned her head back toward the cliff, her body trembling uncontrollably. Kaleb sighed, taking off his outer coat and draping it over her. "I don't know what you're looking for, but if you stay here 10 more minutes, you'll die." He lifted the animal. She was heavy, solid muscle beneath the soaked fur. Kaleb gritted his teeth, enduring the weight on his worn knees, climbing back up to the ranger station step by step. On his shoulder, the dog kept craning her neck to look behind until the white snow swallowed the view. Inside the ranger station, the fire in the hearth blazed, radiating precious warmth that drove out the deadly cold. Kaleb placed the dog on a large wooden table, laying a military blanket beneath her. The smell of wet fur, stale blood, and antiseptic alcohol began to mingle in the air. Kaleb worked with the precision of a machine, cleaning the wound, setting the leg bone, applying the splint. The dog lay still, enduring the ordeal. She didn't need an anesthetic. Every time the pain surged, she merely stiffened her body, squeezed her eyes shut, and exhaled sharply. This extraordinary endurance was not natural. When Kaleb shaved away the matted blood around her ear to check for a head injury, his hand froze. The flashlight beam illuminated the inner ear clearly. A dark blue tattoo stood out starkly against the pink skin. K734. Kaleb dropped the clippers onto the table, the metallic clatter jarring in the quiet room. He took a step back, staring at the animal. "You're not a house dog," he mumbled, his voice trembling with astonishment. "You're a soldier." This designation was too familiar to him. It was an identification code, not from ordinary police dog kennels, but the standard of specialized training camps, the kind that created four-legged fighting machines, dogs valued at tens of thousands of dollars, considered living weapons. Why would a dog like this be shot and thrown into a ravine like trash? He named her Zura, a name that came to him suddenly, meaning princess or flower in Hebrew. But to him, it sounded more like a warrior's name. Night fell quickly like a black velvet curtain descending upon the peak. The blizzard outside had turned into a screaming monster, rattling the sturdy oak windows. Kaleb placed a bowl of warm meat porridge in front of Zara. "Eat. You lost a lot of blood." But Zara didn't eat. She stood up on 3 legs, the splinted leg dangling. Painfully, she limped persistently around the entrance door. Her claws scraped against the wooden floor, creating an haunting catch sound. She sniffed the door crack, then let out a long, pathetic howl. The cry pierced through the sound of the storm, reverberating in Kaleb's chest, waking the pains he thought had been long dormant. "Lie down," Kaleb barked, his voice ringing with old authority. Zara flinched, turning back to look at him. Her ears flattened, showing clear submission, but her eyes still burned with an unquenchable fire. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of something else. She turned back to the door, scratching violently at the thick wood with her front paws. Blood began to seep from between her claws, smearing bright red streaks onto the dark brown door. Kaleb couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up, walked over, and grabbed the collar, which he had just put on her. "Do you want to die? It's a storm out there." You'll be dead for sure. He roared, trying to impose logic on the animal. Zara struggled. And then, in a moment of desperation, she turned back, gently biting Kaleb's sleeve. Not to attack, but to pull. She pulled him toward the old military backpack he had tossed in the corner, the backpack he had used to carry her back. Kaleb frowned, letting her drag him. Zara nudged her nose into the side pocket of the backpack, pulling out a stained, old handkerchief covered in gun oil that Kaleb often used to wipe his hands. She dropped the handkerchief at his feet, then looked down at her belly, then back at him, then back at the door. Kaleb followed her gaze. In the flickering firelight, he saw Zara's lower abdomen. The fur had been shaved to treat the graze, revealing engorged, swollen teats leaking a few drops of white milk. An electric current ran down Kaleb's spine. He knelt down, his hand shaking as he touched her belly. Warm. Full. My God, Kaleb whispered, his breath catching in his throat. You're nursing. Everything suddenly became clear. The desperation on the cliff edge. The eyes following the truck. The stubborn endurance of pain. The clawing at the door until she bled. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to get back to her puppies. Those men had dumped the mother, but kept the children? Or had they dumped the whole litter somewhere in this freezing snow? Kaleb looked at his watch. It had been more than 6 hours since he found Zara. 6 hours in a blizzard. An adult dog could endure, but newborn puppies? Their chance of survival was dwindling. With every second, he looked at Zara. The mother dog was watching him with suffocating anticipation. She trusted him. She believed that the man who saved her could also save her children. Kaleb closed his eyes. The image of Gunnar flashed in his mind. That day, when Gunnar was shot, the dog's eyes held no reproach, only absolute trust that Kaleb would do the right thing. And he had promised never to abandon a teammate. But I gave up, Kaleb told himself. I fled to this mountain to escape responsibility. But tonight, responsibility had found its way to his doorstep, in the form of a four-legged mother bleeding. Kaleb stood up. The fatigue and melancholy vanished. In its place was the cold, sharp focus of the special ops soldier of old. He walked to the weapon cabinet, took out his AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, and loaded a full magazine. He strapped the combat knife to his calf, put on an extra thermal layer, and looped the tactical flashlight around his neck. All right, Kaleb said, his voice deep and steady, devoid of hesitation. He turned to Zara, who had sprung to her feet, her tail wagging slightly, her eyes bright with hope. He opened the door. The blizzard surged in, bone-chillingly cold, scattering the papers on the table. But neither man nor dog backed away. Kaleb looked out into the pitch-black night, where death lurked, then down at his injured new teammate. Lead the way, K. 734, he commanded. We're going to get the little ones home. They stepped outside, leaving the warmth behind, plunging into the white darkness of the Rockies. This was no longer just a rescue. This was Kaleb's first battle in years, a battle to find himself. Again, 10 kilometers of wilderness in a snowstorm was no stroll. It was a march through a white hell. The old forest of the Rockies groaned under the weight of accumulated snow. The drooping pine branches looked like ghostly arms waiting to strike down the traveler. Kaleb, with the experience of a special forces soldier who had fought in the harshest mountains, moved like a ghost. His breath was steady, controlled through his face covering, but his legs screamed in protest. But Zara was the one who astonished him. The female dog walked 3 steps ahead of him, limping but resolute. The splinted leg made her gait uneven. Every step onto the cold snow must have been agonizing, yet she never made a sound. Zara moved in absolute silence. She knew how to use the whistling wind to mask her own noise, how to stick to the dark zones where moonlight couldn't reach. You were trained for reconnaissance, Kaleb thought, his heart filled with admiration mixed with pity. And now, you're scouting to save your children. After nearly 2 hours of battling the storm, Zara stopped. She lowered her center of gravity, her ears pricked, then turned back to Kaleb, signaling with a slight toss of her head toward the front. They had arrived. Nestled in a narrow valley, obscured by steep cliffs, were the remnants of an old mine abandoned since the 90s. Rusty metal structures reached toward the dark sky like the ribs of a dead monster. But beneath that desolation was life, a rotten and vicious kind of life. Yellow light spilled from the cracks of a large corrugated metal warehouse. The smell of diesel smoke from a generator mingled with another distinct odor that made Kaleb's stomach turn. The smell of ammonia, old blood, and fear. The smell of a concentration camp for dogs. Kaleb signaled Zara to lie down and take cover behind a large boulder. He took out his infrared binoculars to observe. 2 guards with rifles patrolled, lazily in front of the gate. Inside the barbed wire fence were rows of sturdy kennels. This was no ordinary dog breeding facility. Kaleb recognized the model. This was a hell kennel. Drug and arms traffickers often set up these camps to breed German Shepherds and Malinois, but not for service or protection. They wanted to create monsters. They inbred for massive size, injected steroids to stimulate aggression, and culled any with signs of weakness, meaning those who retained their natural loyalty and affection. Zara had been discarded because she was too good a mother, too gentle, not insane enough to be a weapon. Taking advantage of the guards turning their backs to light cigarettes, Kaleb cut the wire fence at a hidden corner. Zara slipped through first, leading him toward a small, isolated, unlit warehouse. Inside, the warehouse was freezing, dark, and damp. Kaleb turned his tactical flashlight to the lowest setting, shielding the beam with his hand. The scene revealed made his blood boil. In a rusted metal cage near the floor, 4 tiny fluff balls were piled atop each other for warmth. They were German Shepherd puppies, only about 4 weeks old, with soft, downy fur and bewildered eyes. They trembled violently, not just from the cold, but from hunger and thirst. A frozen water bowl and an empty food dish lay scattered nearby. Zara rushed to the cage, whimpering choked sounds. She reached her tongue through the wire, licking the faces of her children. The puppies recognized their mother's scent, starting to yelp weakly, trying to stretch toward her teats. "Shoo, easy now," Kaleb whispered, his hands quickly pulling out the bolt cutters. "I'll get you out right away." The sound of metal being sheared echoed with a sharp clank in the still night. Kaleb swung the cage door open. Zara rushed in, pushing each puppy toward Kaleb with her nose, as if to say, "Save them first." Kaleb opened his backpack, lining it with his spare sweater, and began picking up the puppies one by one. 1, 2, 3. Crack! A loud sound rang out. Not a gunshot, but the click of an electrical breaker being flipped. In an instant, the entire warehouse was flooded with light from high-powered floodlights mounted on the ceiling. The blinding brightness forced Kaleb to squint, his right hand instantly reaching for the AR-15 strapped across his chest. "I told you." A hoarse voice, smelling strongly of cigarettes, came from the main entrance. "The bitch would come back. Dogs are always stupid because of so-called affection." Kaleb blinked to adjust to the light. Blocking the doorway were 3 men. The one in the middle, wearing a long leather coat and holding a silver-plated pistol. His face, deeply pockmarked, was looking at Kaleb with derision. It was Vargas, the notorious border trafficker. "Who are you?" Vargas asked, the gun still pointed to the ground. He wasn't rushed. He was in his territory with overwhelming numbers. "An old ranger who likes to play hero." Kaleb didn't answer. He lightly kicked the backpack, signaling Zara to retreat behind him. "Let's go, and I'll pretend I never saw your animal camp," Kaleb said, his voice icy. Vargas burst into raucous laughter. "Let you go? You break into my house, try to steal my assets, and then demand to leave? No, old man, you're not going anywhere. But I won't waste a bullet on you. I have a new toy that needs a field test." Vargas nodded to a henchman standing next to a large iron door in the corner of the warehouse. The henchman grinned menacingly, grabbed a lever, and pulled hard. The iron door rattled open, followed by the heavy clanking of chains. From the deep darkness of that confinement room, a low growl emerged, vibrating in the chests of those standing near. A monster walked out. It was a German shepherd, but preposterously huge. It must have weighed 50 kilograms, 110 pounds. Larger than any service dog Kaleb had ever seen. Its pitch-black fur bristled along its spine. Its massive, bulging body was crisscrossed with scars, evidence of forced fights, lashings, and chemical injections. Its name was Titan. Titan's eyes were bloodshot, veined with the madness of rage. It snorted, drool dripping constantly from its razor-sharp white fangs. It didn't bark. The most dangerous dogs never bark before they attack. "Kill him," Vargas ordered, his voice as light as ordering the swatting of a fly. Titan charged. Its speed was unreal for its massive size. It was like a black bullet fired from a barrel. Zara, despite standing behind Kaleb, reacted faster than him. Her instinct to protect her pack made her forget her broken leg, forget the pain. She darted forward, using her smaller body to intercept Titan, but the fight was too mismatched. Titan needed only a simple shoulder barge to send Zara flying aside. The mother dog slammed hard into. The metal wall cried out in pain and collapsed. With the obstruction gone, Titan leaped at Kaleb. Kaleb didn't have time to raise his rifle. He could only bring up his left arm, wrapped in a thick sleeve to cushion the bite. The entire 50 kilograms mass of the beast slammed into his chest, knocking him backward onto the cold concrete floor. Titan's huge mouth missed Kaleb's throat by a fraction, its teeth grinding on the metal stock of the rifle with a screeching sound. Kaleb used every ounce of a soldier's strength to clamp down on the animal's front legs, preventing it from tearing him apart. The foul stench of the beast's breath washed over his face. Viscous drool dripped onto his cheek. "Finish him, Titan!" Vargas shouted, exhilarated. Titan growled, pushing its full body weight down to crush its prey's resistance. Kaleb felt his ribs about to break. He could pull the combat knife from his calf. A stab to the flank or throat would end this monster's life. He knew its weak points. He was trained to kill fighting dogs. But looking deep into the bloodshot eyes mere inches from his face, Kaleb paused. In those eyes, beneath the veneer of drug-induced fury and torture, Kaleb saw something familiar. It wasn't the savagery of a predator. It was panic. This dog was terrified. It was attacking because it was forced to, because it believed if it didn't kill, it would be killed. It was a brainwashed soldier turned into a slave. He's just like me, Kaleb thought. A broken weapon. Kaleb released his grip on the knife. Instead, he took a deep breath, channeling all the internal strength and authority of a former commanding officer into his chest. He looked straight into Titan's eyes, without blinking, and shouted a command in German, the native language of all working dogs. "Platz! Down!" The shout echoed through the warehouse, overriding even Vargas's laughter. It was sharp, definitive, and contained the overwhelming power of an alpha. A miracle happened. Titan's body, taut as a bowstring, suddenly froze. Its bloodshot eyes blinked once, the madness momentarily replaced by confusion. Memory, deep within Titan's brain, where the beatings had failed to erase everything, lay a kernel of memory from its early days. Days of training by a strict but fair hand. Days when this command meant cease fighting. Mission accomplished, safe. The instinct of a soldier to obey surged stronger than any stimulant drug. Titan slowly lowered its head. Its fangs released Kaleb's collar. Its previously erect ears flattened. Its tail, which had been rigid, clamped tightly between its hind legs. It slowly lay down, right on top of Kaleb. Its massive body began to tremble violently. It waited for a strike. An electric shock, like those Vargas administered whenever it hesitated. But the strike never came. Kaleb exhaled sharply, cold sweat beading on his forehead. He withdrew his hand from the defensive position and slowly, very slowly, placed his calloused hand on the top of the huge animal's head. "Good boy," Kaleb whispered, his voice strangely warm. "Good boy, big guy. You're not a monster. You're a good soldier." Titan looked up at Kaleb. The panic in its eyes dissipated, replaced by bewilderment. For the first time after years of hell, Someone touched it without causing pain. Someone called it good. By the door, the smile on Vargas's face vanished. He stared wide-eyed at the unbelievable scene, his most uncontrollable monster lying meekly under the hand of the intruder. "What the hell is this?" Vargas roared, raising his pistol. "Get up, Titan! Kill him! I said kill him!" Titan heard Vargas's voice. It flinched, terrified, but Kaleb's hand on its head pressed down gently, a reassuring signal. "I am here. I protect you." Kaleb knew this. Moment of surprise wouldn't last. He needed to act immediately. Kaleb's left hand was still stroking Titan, but his right hand stealthily reached into his jacket pocket, pulling the pin on an M18. "Smoke or not? Sorry about this," Kaleb said loudly for Vargas to hear. "But this dog answers to me now." He dropped the grenade, letting it roll toward the door. Hiss! Boom! A thick purple smoke column erupted, quickly engulfing the confined space of the warehouse. Coughing and curses erupted in chaos. Vargas fired wildly into the smoke. Bang! Bang! Kaleb sprang up. He snatched the backpack containing the 4 puppies and slung it over his shoulder. He ran to Zara, helping her stand. "Let's go." Then he turned to Titan, the dog still lying confused amid the dense smoke. Kaleb slapped his thigh hard and shouted the next command. "Voraus! Forward!" Titan understood that command. It was the command to move, to charge. It looked at Kaleb, then at Vargas, dimly visible. In the smoke, the choice was made. It turned its back on the cruel master and followed the man who had just shown it respect. The group, an injured old soldier, a limping mother, a recently awakened giant, and 4 tiny lives on a back, burst out the back door of the warehouse. They plunged into the night storm, leaving behind Vargas's insane screams. "Go after him! Bring me the dog! I want to skin all of them alive!" The life-or-death escape began, and the final fortress awaited them on the other side of the ridge. The old ranger station teetered on the cliff, enduring the raging blizzard that threatened to tear the world apart. But inside, another fire was burning, the fire of survival and camaraderie. Kaleb bolted the main door with a thick oak plank. His breath steamed white in the cold air. He knew the sole road down the mountain had been blocked by an avalanche. There was no retreat. This wooden house was now their final fortress. Outside, flickering flashlights swept across the windows. The roar of snowmobiles signaled that Vargas's men had caught up. 6 of them, heavily armed, were tightening the noose. "Listen up," Kaleb said, his voice low and calm, his eyes sweeping over his 4-legged comrades. "We are not dying here tonight." He quickly set up their positions. Dura, with her rigid splint, was guided by Kaleb into the deepest corner of the room, behind a massive stone fireplace. He placed the backpack containing the 4 tiny lives next to her. "Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta," Kaleb mumbled, naming the 4. Puppies snuggling against their mother. "Zara, your mission is to protect them. Do not leave your post." "Understood." Zara licked his hand, her amber eyes resolute. She lay down, curling her body around the pups, but her ears remained pricked toward the back window, guarding the house's blind spot. As for Titan, the pitch-black giant stood in the middle of the room. Kaleb knelt down, quickly cleaned the blood from its muzzle, and gave it a drink of water. He looked into its still faintly wild, bloodshot eyes. "Titan," Kaleb called. The dog looked at him, waiting. "The main door is yours. Anything that steps through that door that isn't me, tear it apart." Titan gave a low growl in its throat, a sound that vibrated the wooden floor. It walked over, lay down flat in front of the doorway, its muscles coiled tight like a spring. It had found a new purpose, not to kill out of fear, but to fight to protect its alpha. Crash! The sound of shattering glass. A flaming bottle flew through the window, smashing into the middle of the room. Gasoline flared up, licking at the old rug. "Fire!" Kaleb yelled. He grabbed a wool blanket, rushing to extinguish the quickly spreading flames. Outside, the shooting began. Bang! Bang! Bullets pierced the wooden walls, tearing up the furniture inside. Kaleb rolled behind an overturned table, his AR-15 beginning to return fire through the window gaps. "Come out here, you bastard!" Vargas roared through a handheld speaker. "You won't escape." Kaleb shot down one man attempting to approach the porch, but they were too numerous. They split into two attack fronts. While Kaleb was busy exchanging fire at the front, the sound of splintering would ring out from the back. The kitchen window shattered. A large mercenary jumped in, a gleaming combat knife in his hand. He saw Kaleb's back turned to him. A perfect sneak stab, but he had forgotten one thing. Kaleb wasn't alone. From a shadow behind the fireplace, a black blur darted out. No growl, no warning. It was Zara. Though her broken leg caused her extreme pain, her motherly instinct turned her into a deadly arrow. Slash! Zara's teeth sunk deep into the mercenary's knife-holding wrist. The sound of bone snapping rang out clearly. He screamed hysterically, dropping the knife. Zara didn't let go. She yanked hard, pulling him stumbling onto the floor, then stood guard between him and her pups, baring her fangs and snarling a threat. Kaleb turned around, smashing the rifle stock into the mercenary's temple, knocking him out instantly. "Good girl," Kaleb gasped. But the situation at the main door was critical. The oak door began to crack under the force of a battering ram. Kaleb looked at Titan. The giant dog had stood up, its fur bristling. Kaleb nodded. "Fast! Attack!" As the door burst open, instead of a terrified ranger, the criminals faced a black nightmare. Titan launched out like a cannonball. It rammed the man holding the ram, then leaped onto the next. Its strength was terrifying. The criminal's formation instantly shattered. Panic gunfire erupted, but missed its mark as Titan moved too fast, too violently in the swirling snowstorm. Kaleb rushed onto the porch to provide cover for Titan. He shot down two men attempting to flank, but then his eyes caught a cold, red light cutting across the snow. A laser sight. It was moving across Titan's black coat. The dog was focused on subduing a mercenary, completely unaware that death was targeting him. At the edge of the forest, Vargas was kneeling on one knee, squinting through the scope of his rifle. Time stood still. Kaleb looked at Titan, the monster whose human side he had awakened, the animal that had just regained faith in life. He couldn't let it die. Not again. Not like Gunner. No thought, no calculation. Kaleb burst from the cover of the porch column. He shielded Titan with his own body. Crack! The explosion tore through the night. Kaleb felt like a truck had slammed into his left shoulder. His entire body was thrown backward, collapsing onto the cold snow. Hot blood gushed out, staining a patch of white snow red. Kaleb, a silent scream in his mind. Darkness began to creep into his vision. Titan heard the gunshot and the fall. It turned back. When it saw its alpha lying motionless in a pool of blood, something in Titan broke. It was no longer an obedient service dog. It reverted to its original form, a creature protecting its injured family. Titan let out a terrifying roar, the sound echoing throughout the valley. It abandoned the mercenary at its feet, charging straight toward Vargas with the speed of a black flash. Vargas frantically pulled the trigger, but his hands were trembling. Titan leaped up, knocking the rifle away, and pinned the trafficker down in the snow. It didn't bite to kill him, but its fangs close to his throat were enough to leave Vargas paralyzed with fear. Just then, the familiar thump-thump-thump sound echoed in the sky. Powerful floodlights from a police helicopter swept down, turning night into day. "Police, drop your weapons." SWAT team members rappelled down from the helicopter, quickly subduing the remnants of the gang. But as they approached the porch, they all stopped. A tragic and moving sight unfolded under the floodlights. Kaleb lay unconscious, his breath coming out in weak, shallow puffs of smoke. But he was not cold. Lying on top of him, using their thick fur and warm body heat to warm their master, were Titan and Zara. Titan, despite the enemy's blood on his muzzle, was gently licking Kaleb's cheek. Zara lay close to his injured side, and from inside the house, 4 tiny puppies clumsily crawled out. They weren't afraid of the helicopter noise or the strangers. They climbed onto Kaleb's chest, nestling into his neck and armpits, forming a living, warm blanket. The entire dog family formed an impenetrable protective circle. When a medic tried to approach, Titan gave a warning growl. Only when Kaleb faintly regained consciousness, gently placed his hand on Titan's head and whispered, "It's okay, friend," did the giant dog reluctantly step back, allowing the hero to be saved. 6 months later, spring had returned to Silver Creek Valley, chasing away the deadly cold of that winter. Lush green meadows stretched out at the foot of the ranger station, which had now been renovated and featured a new wooden sign hanging by the gate. Silver Creek Rescue and Training Center. Kaleb stepped out onto the porch, holding a hot cup of coffee. He walked with a slight limp. His left shoulder was still a bit stiff when the weather changed, but the smile on his face was brighter than ever. "All right, focus," he called out from the training yard for rambunctious German shepherd adolescents, with shiny coats dashed toward him like arrows. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta were now grown, intelligent, and agile. They were being trained as mountain search and rescue dogs. Calmly following the youngsters was Zara. She walked almost normally, only a slight limp when running too fast. She nudged her head into Kaleb's hand, enjoying the familiar ear scratch. And finally, Titan. The pitch-black giant wore a red collar, engraved with the word Captain. Titan didn't run and jump like the young ones. He walked right by Kaleb's side, pressing close to his leg, serving as a steady anchor whenever Kaleb's step faltered. Kaleb sat down on the wooden steps, warm in the spring sun. Titan immediately lay down, resting his large head on Kaleb's lap. Eyes half closed, Kaleb looked out into the distance, toward the mountain peak where he had once buried painful memories. He placed a hand on his chest, where his heart beat strong and peaceful. "Gunner," he whispered to the wind, his voice choked but no longer sorrowful. "Do you see? I didn't break my vow. I didn't replace you. I just expanded our pack. Somewhere, I hope you're proud of." Titan. Titan seemed to understand his owner's thoughts. He looked up, licked Kaleb's chin lightly, then barked a sound that echoed across the vast expanse. That bark was not an alarm, not a battle cry. It was the sound of life, the sound of joy, confirming a powerful resurrection from the ashes of the past. The fortress of snow had now melted, giving way to an eternal home of unwavering love and loyalty.